morning, I'd invite you to open your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 1. How much do you trust the advice of people who know more than you do? I think there's a lot of ways that we can realize that in our life we do trust the advice of other people. Have you ever been looking for something on Amazon and you see that it had so many ratings, like 4.5 out of 5 stars or something, and then you go, based on that, I'm going to go ahead and buy this, but then you look for like the lowest rated one and you saw that the person was just kind of really emotional about something and probably not a good resource anyways, but most people really like this product, so based on what they're saying, I'm going to go ahead and buy this. In our culture, there's a lot of people that put a lot of stock in psychological research. Psychologists or therapists that have done studies on people and they've reached such and such a conclusion, and that's why you need to raise your kids this way or that way. There's a lot of trust that people have in people who know more than we do. At the same time, I don't know that we always really trust other people who know more than us for the things that matter the most. What about when somebody who knows more than us is telling us to do something that, morally speaking, we don't feel like doing? Then we can go find experts on the other side of things that tell us the things that we always wanted to do or we wanted to hear anyways. In the book of Ecclesiastes, King Solomon does this experiment, this research project, where he explains to us where satisfaction is not found. And we're either going to have good hearts by listening to the findings that he has, or we will prove to have bad hearts by finding some kind of reason why his findings and his conclusions don't actually apply to me. I want us to go ahead and look at this passage in Ecclesiastes 1, starting in verse 12, through chapter 2, verse 11, where Solomon is going to show that so many of the things that people pursue to try to find satisfaction in life is like a mirage. It feels like it's real, and you get closer and closer to obtaining what it was that you thought that was going to satisfy you, and then it just evaporates. Let's see if we're going to trust what his findings and his conclusions are. Let's read Ecclesiastes chapter 1, starting in verse 12. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is but striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched out with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who were before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of men. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil that I had expended in doing it. And behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. What is it that Solomon is doing here in this experiment? You can understand how he's describing what he's doing here. He's wanting to seek and search out all that is done under the sun. Notice this phrase, by the way, under the sun, under heaven. He actually uses it 3 times in this text, but it's bookending the whole section that we just read. To seek and to search out something is something like what a spy would do. Somebody that's trying to gather all kinds of evidence and research and trying to understand the pros and the cons and weighing everything out the best that he can. But he's seeking and searching out all that is done under heaven or under the sun. What does that mean? Well, this is how the modern person thinks. That I think I can find satisfaction and meaning in life apart from God. If I leave God out of the equation, that's what under the sun means, or under heaven. Life lived in this plane. I'm going to try to figure out all the things that we might be able to do that would bring us satisfaction. And so in chapter 2, verse 1, when he says, I will test you with pleasure, enjoy yourself. Or then if you skip down to verse 10, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. Can you imagine having a period of time like this in your life? Where anything that sounded pleasurable, you're not going to stop yourself from doing it. And anything that your eyes could lay hold of, you want that nice house, you want that nice car, you want that new purse, whatever, that new outfit, anything that you want, you can go ahead and just have. It's yours. This sounds like a dream come true. Notice, though, that 3 times in this text, Solomon wants everybody to know that he maintained wisdom as he did this. He applied his heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under the sun. Or when in chapter 2, verse 3, when he talks about drinking alcohol, my heart still guiding me with wisdom. Or in chapter 2, verse 9, also my wisdom remained with me. Why does he want us to know 3 times in this text that this experiment that I did with wisdom? And by the way, what kind of wisdom would that be? I don't think this is referring to godly wisdom. I think this is talking about what is wise in the eyes of men, what's looked at as sophisticated in the eyes of the world, worldly wisdom. So he's doing all of this with worldly wisdom. Why does he want us to know 3 times that he's doing this with wisdom, though? Because his conclusions are going to seem so insane that people might want to chalk it up to somebody who was not using wisdom. His conclusions, we're all going to want to disagree with these things whenever we think in a worldly kind of way. But he wants us to know that I was controlled in how I did this experiment. I did it with wisdom. These are not the findings of somebody who lost his sanity. So what were his findings? The conclusions that he reaches? Look at chapter 1, verse 12 again. Did you notice how this text begins? I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem. Okay, before we read what the conclusions are coming from somebody with a sane mind and who is also the king. Do you think that you're ever going to have the amount of resources available to you that a king would have? I don't care what era it is. You can ask for whatever you want and you can have it. You can have your eyes laid upon whatever, and the royal treasury is going to be able to take care of all the things that you want. So whatever Solomon's conclusions are, they're from somebody who did this with wisdom. He was sane. And he's the king, which means he has all the resources at his disposal. And his first conclusion is that it was an unhappy business. What does that mean? It's an unhappy business. To try to seek and search out purpose and meaning in life, to search out all the things that might be done under the sun without reference to God, to try to find something that really is lasting, is an unhappy business. Do you know that God designed the world, or he allowed the world to be in such a way after the fall, that apart from him, if you want to try to find satisfaction and meaning in life, it will be an unhappy business for you. It will drive you into despair. It will lead you to the depths of depression. It will cause you to think that the world is just a fraud and that there's no point in actually living in this world. An unhappy business to try to find meaning in life apart from Him. But that's not the only conclusion he has. He also says this all throughout the book, that it's vanity in striving after the wind. I think it was cold enough this morning for people to breathe, and you saw the air come out, and nobody's going to try to collect that. If you have been a really hot day, you imagine on a really hot day, and suddenly a breeze comes and it kind of cools you off, you're not going to take a mason jar and collect that breeze and just can it up so that on a really other hot day when there's not a breeze, you can just open it up and whoo! Nobody's going to do that. And we would all say that somebody who tries to do something like that doesn't have wisdom and they've lost their sanity. But yet Solomon is saying, this is exactly what you're doing. Every time you think that you can live life apart from God and find satisfaction and meaning in it. What are the things that Solomon sought satisfaction in that he has to say it was like vanity? It was here and then it was gone. It was like trying to grasp after the wind. Now, in this text, I count 7 things that he tried to find satisfaction, and maybe you could add some more to it. And I think you can make all of them start with the letter W without stretching it too much. There's only one of them that I have to stretch. But all the rest of them, you will see start with the letter W, and it's really cool to see how this works. So the first one is wisdom. You see this in chapter 1, verses 16 through 18, that he's seeking to find meaning or purpose or satisfaction, whatever you want to say, by having wisdom. And this would be wisdom that would be limited to under the sun kinds of wisdom. This is not talking about the fear of the Lord, the beginning of true kind of wisdom. This is trying to look at what the world looks at as sophisticated. What do all the scientific research papers say? What do all the philosophers of our age say? What do all the psychologists that have notary, what do they have to say about things? And he says in this passage that when he applied his heart to know wisdom and madness and folly, he wants to know what's sophisticated and even the things that people think is crazy, that in much wisdom was much vexation. Why would he say that? Do you suppose that if somebody goes, you know what, I'm done studying this 2,000-year-old book because I feel like we're a bunch of people that are still striking stones together to heat up my food, and it's so archaic. I want some things that are new and sophisticated and actually seem like real wisdom. That you start to go down that route, do you think you're going to still have a lot of unanswered questions? Do you suppose you're going to have more problems about how you try to look at the world than you had before? I remember when I was in Atlanta, there was a guy that I studied with every week, and he was in his early 70s. And he used to be homeless, and then he became a bouncer at a brothel, and then he became a lawyer. And he was, of all the people I've ever met, I have never met somebody who had more life experiences than this guy. He also knew 9 languages. And we would go to a Korean coffee shop whenever we studied, and he would talk to the baristas in Korean, and then there'd be somebody that was speaking Spanish next to him, and he was an immigration lawyer. So you can imagine that would be really nice to know a lot of languages. Because of all the languages and cultures this guy had studied, I have never met somebody who had more worldly wisdom than this guy. And he was vexed, and he told me he was vexed. He thought that if he could absorb all of the wisdom of the world and learn as much as he could, then suddenly I would understand what this life is all about, and there are still things that I don't really understand, and it's frustrating. In a much smaller way, do you collect all of your podcasts and books that aren't even coming at all from a Christian perspective? And you kind of puff yourself up thinking that you're pretty smart, that I've read these things, and I know about these research journals, and I know all these things that these people that don't care a thing about what the Lord has to say, but because I know those things, I think I know some things now. And then you realize that in 10 years, that research is all going to be outdated, and everybody's going to think it was crazy. It's a rat race, thinking that that's going to be the thing that gives you meaning and satisfaction, this feeling of sophistication that I know what the worldly wise say. Now, here's the second W, and this is the only one that I have to stretch, and that's whimsies. But you see it in the text. You'll see it. In verse 8, what is a whimsy? Something that's whimsical? It's something that is maybe lighthearted. It's something that's playfully quaint, fanciful behavior or humor. Notice that in verse 8, he says that he got singers, both men and women. Now, what kind of people were allowed to sing at the temple? Men. So people in this culture would have been used to especially hearing men sing. But Solomon was so sophisticated in his whimsical pursuits that he got men and women. Can you imagine what that would have sounded like together? And he didn't have to have all of his music. He didn't have to have Spotify. He could just be walking around his palace, and then he'd have people following behind him, and he could just clap and start singing that one song that I really like. You guys are really good with that. Make some new ones too while you're at it. And he would have had all the best music to be able to listen to in this time. I got a text message a few days ago from one of the first people I ever taught the gospel to. And the person who taught me the gospel, and he's in Minnesota, and the person who taught me the gospel was visiting Minnesota not too long ago, and they were talking with each other. And these are some of the only Christians that ever saw me wearing death metal t-shirts, where I had the long sideburns and all of my t-shirts were heavy metal bands and everything like that, and they were joking about their early memories of me, because I went to high school with the guy, and then the girl that taught me the gospel, she met me in college when I was still like that. I tried to find my meaning in life from music. I remember the lyrics of my favorite band, Dream Theater, and I would listen to their lyrics and go, yeah, that's what life is all about. And I got so into it that my brother and dad had to pull me aside at one point and say, do you realize that there is more to life than music? What's the other whimsical thing? Is laughter. And maybe these things go together in some ways because of the commonality that they have. But he says in verse 2, I said of laughter it is mad. And pleasure, what use is it? That's an interesting question. Are you the kind of person that likes to find one comedian after another and one funny movie after another, one funny TV series after another, and deep in your heart you know that you're depressed, but you want to just make light of everything? You ever been around the kind of person that constantly has to make a joke out of everything? They're the last kind of person you would ever go to about anything serious. Have you ever known people that were comedians or really liked, and not that these things are inherently wrong, that's not the point, but if you think you can dull your senses with the narcotic of laughter or music, you're going to find out that that's not where life is found either. So how about the next one is wine? In verse 3, I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. Now, remember, he says about this, he did this with wisdom. If you just did a Google search on what does it mean to drink responsibly, that's how people talk about it. Let's drink responsibly. I think that's what Solomon maybe means by that. I don't know what drinking responsibly would have looked like back then. But in our culture, it means that you have enough food before you drink. Don't upset your stomach. And that if you're going to get drunk, that you're with people that will take care of you, that you're thinking about those kinds of things. So he's not doing this in some kind of insane way where he's just getting drunk constantly. But what is it that he wants to see if wine will do for him? In verse 3, he wanted to see if it would cheer my body. Why do a lot of people resort to something like this? Life is dull. Life is painful. I have all of these traumatic memories from when I was growing up. Things aren't the way that I want them to be. So how about I just dull myself and not have to think about anything? And maybe if I just keep doing that, that's where I can finally find satisfaction in life. But how about this? Maybe what Solomon means about doing this with wisdom means that he wasn't even getting drunk. Let's just say that that's what he meant by it. But he wanted to be sophisticated with it. Oh, this is like Chardonnay from 6,000 years ago, and the taste, and then it doesn't even compare to whatever the other things are called, and I feel a little bit of the flavor of this, and I just like to be a very sophisticated kind of person. And maybe people will really look up to me, and maybe I'll have a cool YouTube channel, and everybody will think that my taste buds are so sophisticated that, that doesn't do it either. Well, okay, how about this one? How about work? You know, he makes vineyards, houses, gardens, parks, fruit trees. He even makes pools to feed the trees. He does say in chapter 2, verse 10, that my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. I think he's talking about the actual labor he did, and maybe what he means by that is that the act of working had some degree of some degree of satisfaction. That it was good to work. The moment of working had some reward to it. But then I would be done with it, and I would wonder what was left after it all, and what was the point of it all. You know, people talk about being a workaholic. Would it be fair to say that like the previous generation was more like workaholic, and now like the upcoming generation is like don't want to work at all? If you were going to paint in a really broad and mean kind of brush, would that be sort of the way to describe that? What happens with a workaholic? If you find all of your meaning and purpose in your work, there will come a time where your age won't let you work anymore, and your age will strip your God away from you, and you won't be able to do the thing that meant so much to you. Or, let's say that you're on your deathbed, and you were able to work all the way up until your deathbed. You know the old adage that people say, the old thing that people say? That nobody on their deathbed says that they wish that they spent more time in their office. You start to realize that you had neglected relationships that mattered more than your job. It's a good thing to work, but it's a bad God. Here's another one, is wealth. In this passage, he talks about how he had male and female slaves. He had a lot of gold and silver. He even had slaves that were born to his house, which means that he had a lot of wealth to have all those slaves and be able to house all of those people. There's a passage in 1 Kings that says that in Solomon's days, silver was just as common as stones. So how about this? If I had a lot of wealth, then I'd have a lot of influence and power, and I could always get my way. But then Solomon says a couple chapters later in Ecclesiastes 5:10, he who loves money will never be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. If you have dreams of being extraordinarily wealthy one day, and you're going to really get to a point where you will actually be satisfied with your income, but I'm not at that point right now, Solomon says that you're going to be in a rat race, and if you're never satisfied with your money, and you're never okay with your income, and you're able to take care of your family, and you're always needing more and wanting more and thinking, the only thing you're doing is drinking salt water thinking that it's going to quench your thirst. Now, there's another passage in the Bible that talks about some of the dangers of wealth in Proverbs 19:4, where it says, wealth brings many new friends, but a poor man is deserted by his friend. Do you think that for really wealthy people, they can really wonder who wants to be their friend for the right reasons? Do you think that there could be a degree of loneliness associated with wealth? Because, you know, when I was poor and I was in the doldrums, nobody seemed to really want to know me. But now that I have something, now I've got people that are interested in my life. Do you suppose in the back of their mind there could be the lingering question, is it just because people are trying to get stuff from me? Do you think that would come crashing in on you and you would realize that there's not much satisfaction that comes from that either? How about the next one is women? And we could just say, or men if you're a woman seeking a man, or romance, but that doesn't start with a W. But in verse 8, he says, I got many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. There's a passage in 1 Kings that says that Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. You know what a lot of people, you know what a lot of guys do a lot of time looking up on the YouTube and reading books about is how to talk to women and be smooth. Like, how do I make them want me? And then there's these tactics on how to not give them too much affirmation so that they'll keep coming back to me. And there's all these really ridiculous things that people look at in an earthly wise kind of way and go, okay, yeah, that's how I'm going to woo a woman. That's how I'm going to make them come to me because it's going to show that I'm desirable. And some kind of weird self-worship thing, whatever that is. You know, of all the people that have ever lived, do you suppose Solomon was the guy who understood women? 700 wives and 300 concubines? And then his research says, and that was vanity and striving after the wind. But Solomon also says that he who finds a wife finds a good thing. So what does he mean here? Well, maybe part of what he means here is I sought a lot of different women, and that wasn't satisfying. Do you think there's guys like that? Do you think there's girls like that? Where it's like, one relationship after another, after another, after another, and I just give myself to so many people, and I think that, it'll be kind of fun for a little bit. And maybe what Solomon is saying is many romantic relationships was not satisfying. Because whoever finds a wife finds a good thing, and it's not good for man to be alone, and Solomon wrote Song of Solomon. Or maybe what he's saying is this. Idolatry is when you take a good thing and turn it into a god, and then it becomes a bad thing for you. Even if what Solomon is saying here was one man, one woman, and this is what I tried to find all of my fulfillment in, you could still reach the same conclusion. This wasn't ultimately meeting my deepest needs. I've seen couples before that have read every book on how to have a good marriage. And they've gone to every conference and lectureship on how to have a good marriage. And they talk about it all the time. And because they spend so much time craving a good marriage, they've learned all these things to constantly criticize each other with, that they're never going to have a good marriage because they're too obsessed with having a good marriage. You can overthink some of these kinds of things. You might take something that God intended for a good blessing and end up crushing somebody with demands that only God can fulfill in your heart. Notice the last one is Solomon became well known. He says it 3 times in this passage. In 1:16, I have acquired great wisdom surpassing all. In chapter 2, verse 7, about his wealth, he had more than any. In chapter 2, verse 9, I became great and surpassed all. His wisdom, his work, his accolades, all of this, everybody knew he had more than anybody else. Do you know what pride is? Let's say, okay, here's a highlighter I just found. I don't know why this is here. There's a highlighter here. Let's say that I'm just really, I think this highlighter is amazing. And I have a lot of pride in this highlighter. That's not how pride works. Pride works where you guys have highlighters that are not as good as this one. And because I have the best highlighter in the room, I think that I'm like the best highlighter possessor and owner right now. Pride works where I compare what other people have and go, I've got more than you. Pride never rejoices simply in what it has. It has to have more than other people, more influence, more wealth, more accolades, more work accomplishments. And if I can have more, then I'm proud of it. So how about this? How about you keep telling yourself that if I have the most in Bowling Green, let's start with this, the most in this church, of whatever it is, then I'll feel really good. And you go, oh, no, actually, there's people in Bowling Green that have got more than me. I got to have the most in Bowling Green. And then you get more than anybody else in Bowling Green. Not just your church, but more than anybody else in Bowling Green. Kentucky, the Commonwealth of Kentucky. No, how about the United States? Oh, there's some guy in the Middle East that sells oil that has more money than Elon Musk, but he's just not as well known. I need to have more. Let's say that best case scenario happened where you had more than everybody, and you won the competition. Would you be happy then? Nope. In our own little ways, do we seek to be well known? We have all these efforts that I hope people notice this, I hope people notice that. I did this thing, and it starts maybe in the local church, and I hope everybody noticed, all these things that I did and that I do and all this sort of, and then you get some accolades and you go, oh, wow, like that praise that I got was like a hit of cocaine. It kind of felt good in that moment, and then I'm starting to crash, and I need more and more and more, and it just becomes a drug addiction. Maybe you have these, you know what happens with the younger generation right now? Well, since social media, is everybody that's got an Instagram account or X account or whatever thinks that there's like 6 trillion people just eagerly waiting for you to post something. Because I got my reach and I've got my influence. No, you don't. Not really. And let's just say that you did. Would you still be satisfied with how well known you are because of these pictures and videos? That nobody really cares. Because it's a bunch of other things that people are posting where everybody's wanting their own attention as well. You're in a universe of people that all are just craving their own attention and using other people to try to get it. You know what Solomon is doing here? Does this passage remind you of any other passages in the Bible? All the things that Solomon, he's planting vineyards, he's making gardens, he has fruit trees, he made pools to water these things. He made things. Look at all the things he made. Does that sound like any other passages in the Bible to you? What about the Garden of Eden? Where the Lord planted a garden, and he made all these fruit trees. And he had a river that flowed out of Eden to water the garden. And the same Hebrew word where God made these things is the same Hebrew word for what Solomon is doing. You know what Solomon is doing in this passage? It's as if he's trying to recreate the Garden of Eden without God. Do you have any Eden reconstruction projects going on in your life? Maybe this will satisfy me. Maybe that will satisfy me. And I'll kind of come to church and act like God is sort of at the center. And maybe I'll say God's name from time to time, like Lord willing, because that's kind of a religious sounding thing to say. And I'll kind of throw that stuff out there and maybe make the big man think that he is at the center of it all. But really in your heart, you know that it's not true. And you're trying to build Eden without God. And it's going to leave you crushed, depressed, and without any satisfaction. You know, look at this example from Tom Brady. Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me? I mean, maybe a lot of people would say, hey man, this is what it is. I reached my goal, my dream, my life. Me, I think it's got to be more than this. I mean, this can't be what it's all cracked up to be. I mean, I've done it. I'm 27. What else is there for me? How much do you take the advice from people who know more than you? Ecclesiastes says that there's nothing new under the sun. You're not going to be the one that hacks the system. You're not going to be the exception to the rule. And what Jesus teaches is the exact opposite of the worldly wisdom. When Jesus says this in Mark 8, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life and lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? You know, the world says if you want satisfaction, think about what you want and think about all these things that will satisfy you. And the world says, basically, you obsess over your own desires. And to be self-obsessed is to be in the pit of despair. And then Jesus says, get outside of yourself and make your life all about me. Take up the cross. Be willing to suffer for me. Suffer for a cause that's greater than your own sensual passions that are going to go away into your older ages. You make Jesus the center of everything. And suddenly it puts everything in its proper context. If Jesus is everything to me, I can enjoy my wealth, but it's never going to be an idol to me. I can enjoy my entertainment, my whimsies, but it's never going to be the thing that I need for ultimate satisfaction. My work can be done unto the Lord, but it's not my Lord. You know, in looking at the 7 W's, how is it that people try to seek out satisfaction in all those things? You research, you read books, you discuss with other people who like those same kinds of things. You become friends with those people. You challenge each other about those kinds of things. Is that not what we should be doing for one another? That we have spiritual conversations with each other. that we talk about the things that matter the most, that we're learning more about Scripture. We're trying to become better Bible students because this is what I know ultimately satisfies me. None of us are going to have the same resources that Solomon had to conduct this experiment. So I started out with the question, and I'll end with this question. How much do you trust the wisdom of people who know more than you? Your answer to that question will be based on whether or not you listen to the findings of King Solomon for the questions that matter the most. We're about to sing a song, and this song is meant to encourage us. We're going to be singing about whether or not your heart is right with God. Is your heart right with God? He's not going to be mocked. If you've been trying to live your life dabbling in enough religion just to be frustrated with your religion, but it's not really the core of your life. Make God the center. If there's anybody that needs any encouragement, please come forward while we stand and while we sing.